2 weeks ago, in a single week, more than 2,700 people died in France. Not from a war, not from a virus, from heat. And right now, this summer, a heat dome has already killed dozens of Americans, sent hundreds to emergency rooms over the 4th of July weekend alone, and put over 180 million people under heat alerts at the same time. But here is the part that should stop you cold. The deadliest place in a heat wave is not a construction site. It's not a football field. It's a living room. In Chicago in 1995, 739 people died in 5 days. 73% of them were over 65. Most of them were found alone behind locked doors in rooms that had slowly turned into ovens while they sat there believing they were fine. I want you to picture that for a second. Not a dramatic collapse in the street. A person in a chair, maybe with the television on, maybe with a glass of water nearby, who simply never realized their own home had become the thing that was killing them. That is the image that doesn't make the news, and it's the one that should terrify every single one of us. One thing I've learned over the years is that the body often gives us warning signs long before a medical emergency happens. The problem is that most people don't recognize those signs until it's too late. And that gap, the distance between what you believe is keeping you safe and what is actually happening inside your body, is where people die. There are 5 specific mistakes that turn an ordinary hot day into a medical emergency, and at least 2 of them are things millions of people are doing right now, thinking they're being smart. I'm going to walk through each one, tell you exactly why it's dangerous, and give you the fix you can put into action today. But none of the 5 will make sense unless you understand the one thing that ties them all together. So let me start there. Before I go one step further, one quick note, because it's the reason I make these videos. Surviving a heat wave is one piece of something much larger. Understanding how your body actually works and what it needs to stay strong every single day. I've taken the most important things I share with my own patients about living well and put them in one place. If you want it, the link is right on your screen. Your body runs at about 98.6 degrees. When the world around you gets hotter than that, your body has to push the heat out, and it has 2 main tools to do it. The first is blood flow. Your heart sends more blood rushing to your skin, spreading it across that huge surface area so the heat can radiate outward into cooler air. The second is sweat. When perspiration sits on your skin and evaporates into the air, it carries an enormous amount of heat with it. That 1-2 combination, blood to the surface plus evaporation off the skin, is what keeps you alive in the heat. And for the first several decades of your life, it runs on autopilot. You barely notice it working. Here's what no one warns you about. After about age 60, both of those systems start to weaken, and they do it quietly. Research on thermoregulation in older adults confirms that the decline hits on multiple fronts at once. You begin to sweat less, and what sweat you do produce arrives later, after your body has already been heating up for longer than it should. The blood vessels near your skin don't dilate as wide as they used to, so you dump less heat outward. And the part of your brain that monitors temperature and triggers thirst, your internal thermostat, becomes less sensitive. The alarm that used to scream at you to drink water or get out of the sun starts whispering instead. Let me be clear about something before we go any further, because it matters. This does not mean you are fragile. It does not mean something is wrong with you. It happens to strong, fit, independent people. It's biology, and it's universal. But it does mean the margin your body once had to absorb a dangerously hot day has gotten thinner, and you need to account for that. Think of it like driving a car that used to have a full tank of coolant and now runs with the tank half full. The engine works. It just overheats faster if you push it, and you don't get as much warning from the dashboard before it does. There's one more factor that makes all of this worse, and the number you see on the evening forecast actually hides it from you. It's humidity. Remember, your primary cooling weapon is sweat evaporating. But when the air is already saturated with moisture, your sweat can't evaporate. It just rolls down your face and drips off you and does nothing. That's why 95 degrees in the Arizona desert and 95 degrees in Houston are 2 entirely different experiences for your body. One is manageable, the other can be lethal. The heat index, the feels like number, is what actually tells you how hard your body has to work that day. During this summer's heat wave across the eastern United States, some cities hit 103 on the thermometer, but the heat index climbed past 115. That's the number you need to pay attention to. Check the forecast the night before a hot spell. If your phone can send you local heat alerts, turn that feature on today. It takes 30 seconds, and it might be the most important notification you ever receive. Every single mistake I'm about to give you comes back to one question. Is this thing helping your body shed heat, or is it quietly blocking a cooling system that's already running on thinner reserves than you realize? Hold that question, and let's go. Mistake 1. This one trips up more people than any of the others because a fan feels so obviously like it's working. The air moves, your skin registers a breeze, and every instinct you have says you're being cooled down. And in moderate heat, that's true. A fan accelerates evaporation off your skin, and that does pull heat away. But there is a temperature where a fan flips from helping you to actually hurting you, and most people have no idea that line exists. When the air temperature in your room pushes into the mid to high 90s, the air blowing across your body is now hotter than your skin. Instead of pulling heat away, it's pouring heat onto you. Think of it like opening an oven door and pointing a fan at the hot air to blow it into your face. That moving air feels like something is happening, but what's happening is the opposite of cooling. And because your brain interprets moving air as a breeze, you feel comfortable right up until the moment you're not. Your body's temperature climbs, and you have no idea, because the sensation of wind tricks your perception. And this is the part that catches people. This isn't my speculation. The National Weather Service is direct about it. A fan blowing air on someone can actually make them hotter when the heat index is above the high 90s. New York City's own heat mortality data paints an even grimmer picture. Among people who died from heat at home, a quarter of them had a working electric fan running nearby. The fan didn't save them. In some cases, it may have accelerated the problem. These were people who did what had always worked. They just didn't know it stops working past a certain temperature. So what do you do instead? The single most protective thing in dangerous heat is air conditioning, and you do not have to live in it around the clock. Health authorities are clear that even a few hours a day in a cooled environment substantially lowers your risk. If you have air conditioning, use it. Don't ration it to save on the power bill during the days when temperatures are genuinely dangerous. This is your health. Those are the days the power bill doesn't matter. If you don't have it at home, this is the day you leave. A library, a community cooling center, a shopping mall, a neighbor who does have it. You go, you sit in cool air for 2 or 3 hours, and you give your body a chance to reset. And if you're still using a fan, make it work properly. Wet your skin first, a damp cloth draped across your neck, a spray bottle, a cool shower. Give the fan moisture to evaporate. A fan blowing over dry skin in a hot room is theater. A fan blowing over wet skin is actual cooling. And don't underestimate a plain cool bath or shower. It's one of the fastest ways to drop your core temperature when the house has gotten too warm, quicker than a fan and quicker than a cold drink. Light, loose-fitting, pale-colored clothing helps too. Dark, tight fabric traps heat against your body and blocks evaporation. On the worst days, dress like you're trying to let every molecule of heat escape, because you are. Mistake 2. This is the one I most wish I could put on a billboard because it affects tens of millions of people and almost none of them know it. If you are over 60, there is a very good chance you take at least one daily prescription medication, and several of the most commonly prescribed drugs in America directly interfere with the cooling system we just talked about. I want to name specific categories because you deserve specifics, not vague warnings. Diuretics, the water pills that millions of people take for blood pressure or swelling, deliberately pull fluid out of your body. That's their job. But in a heat wave, when you're already losing fluid through perspiration, they can push you toward dehydration significantly faster. Worse, certain combinations like a diuretic paired with an ACE inhibitor or an ARB, which are also extremely common blood pressure drugs, can blunt your sense of thirst and reduce your kidney's ability to hold on to water. You're losing fluid faster, and your body is less capable of telling you about it. Beta blockers, another massive category for blood pressure and heart conditions, do two things that matter in the heat. They can reduce how much you sweat, and they limit your heart's ability to ramp up the extra blood flow to your skin that cooling demands. Two of your primary heat dump mechanisms dialed down at once. Then there's a whole class called anticholinergics, and this one is sneaky because they show up in places you wouldn't expect. Some bladder medications, certain antidepressants, and even common over-the-counter allergy and sleep pills like diphenhydramine, which is in Benadryl, contain anticholinergic properties that can directly suppress your ability to sweat. Your body's number one evaporative cooling tool, switched off by a pill you took for your allergies. I've seen cases where the patient had no idea their nighttime allergy pill was part of the reason they overheated. It seems obvious once you hear it, but almost nobody puts those two pieces together. Now, here is the most critical thing I will say in this entire section, and I need you to hear it clearly. Do not stop taking any of these medications because it's hot outside. Do not skip a dose. Do not adjust the timing on your own. Stopping a blood pressure drug or a heart medication abruptly can be far more dangerous than any heat wave. These drugs are keeping your cardiovascular system stable, and that matters enormously. What you do instead is plan around the risk. If you take anything in these categories, you simply need to be more aggressive about staying cool and staying hydrated than someone who takes nothing. Before this summer gets any hotter, make one phone call. Call your doctor's office or walk up to the pharmacy counter and ask one question: which of my medications affect how I handle heat, and should I do anything differently on extreme days? That is a 5-minute conversation that most people never have, and it is one of the highest value things you can do to protect yourself this summer. Some doctors may fine-tune the timing of a dose during extreme heat, but that decision belongs to them, with your full medical history in front of them, never to you alone in your kitchen. Let me take one quick pause here. If you've made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person this video was made for. If any of this was new to you, do me one small thing. Hit subscribe, tap the like button, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and how hot it's been this week. I read those comments, and they shape what I make next. All right, back to it. Mistake 3. For most of your life, thirst worked perfectly. Your body got low on water, you felt it, you drank, problem solved. It was effortless, but that reliability fades, and it fades earlier than most people realize. Health agencies have documented that older adults experience a measurably reduced sensation of thirst even when their bodies are genuinely depleted. The signal is still there, but it arrives quieter and later than it used to, and in a heat wave, later is too late. Now layer on top of that a diuretic that's actively draining fluid, or a blood pressure medication that dulls the thirst response even further. Add the extra fluid you're losing through perspiration on a 100-degree day. You can be sliding into real dehydration, the kind that thickens your blood, drops your pressure, strains your heart and kidneys, and makes a dizzy spell or a fall onto a hard floor dramatically more likely, and your body never raises the alarm. By the time you actually feel thirsty, you're already behind, and catching up in the heat is a losing game. So you stop relying on the feeling and you switch to a system. On a hot day, keep water within arm's reach at all times and drink from it steadily, not in large bursts, but sipping consistently throughout the day. A reasonable target for most people is roughly a glass every hour when temperatures are high, and more than that if you're active or visibly sweating. Unless your doctor has specifically told you to restrict fluids, particularly if you have advanced heart failure or kidney disease, in which case that instruction takes priority and your doctor's fluid limit wins. There is a simple, free way to check whether your hydration is on track, and it's sitting in your bathroom. Look at the color of your urine. Pale, close to the color of light straw, means you're doing well. Dark and concentrated means you're behind, and you need to catch up now, not after the next meal. And if you're sweating heavily for hours, plain water alone isn't quite enough because you're also losing salt and minerals. That's the moment for a drink with some electrolytes or a snack with some salt in it to keep your body's chemistry balanced. One more thing on fluids, because it trips people up at exactly the wrong moment: a summer cookout or a long hot afternoon on the porch. Alcohol and heavy caffeine both pull water out of your system. A couple of cold beers on a hot afternoon, a pot of coffee during a long, sticky day, those push you the wrong direction at the worst possible time. You don't have to give them up. Just match each one with an extra glass of water and go easy on the days that are genuinely extreme. Mistake 4. This is the mistake that fills the statistics I opened with, and it is the cruelest one because it exploits the very biology that's supposed to protect you. We've already established that your temperature perception dulls with age, your body's thermostat becomes less sensitive, and here is how that plays out in real life on a dangerously hot day. Your house heats up slowly, not all at once. Degree by degree, over the course of an afternoon, the air inside your home creeps upward. The concrete and brick absorb heat during the day and then radiate it back inward. In some apartments and upper floor rooms, the indoor temperature can actually climb higher than the temperature outside, especially at night, when the heat that's soaked into the walls and roof all day starts releasing back into your living space. Researchers call this the urban heat island effect. Your body never gets a chance to recover. Because the climb is gradual, you adapt to it without registering the change. You feel warm, maybe a little tired, maybe slightly foggy. You tell yourself it's just the weather, and from the inside, your perception says you're managing it, but your perception is the thing that's broken. This is exactly what happened in Chicago in 1995. The overnight lows never dropped below the upper 70s. The brick buildings trapped the heat and poured it back into rooms all night long. And person after person was found alone in a room that had become lethally hot without ever recognizing the danger. More than 80% of Americans who die from heat are over the age of 60. This mistake is the reason. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Margaret. Margaret is not one patient. She's a composite built from patterns that repeat in emergency departments every summer, but every detail is drawn from real cases. Margaret was 74. She lived by herself in a second floor apartment. She was sharp, social, took care of her own grocery shopping and her own bills. She took a diuretic for mild high blood pressure and an over the counter antihistamine for her seasonal allergies. Both are common, both are reasonable, and both were quietly working against her cooling system without her having the slightest idea. Margaret had air conditioning, a window unit in her bedroom, but she'd gotten it into her head years ago that running it too much was wasteful, and she'd been fine every other summer with just the windows and a box fan. So, on the hottest day of the week, she kept the unit off, parked herself in her living room chair with the fan going and a crossword puzzle, and drank a cup of tea in the late morning and a glass of water around lunchtime. She felt warm, but not alarmed. By mid-afternoon, the room was over 94 degrees. She didn't know that because she didn't have a thermometer on the wall. She just felt sleepy. She didn't call anyone because from the inside she felt fine. I'm going to finish Margaret's story in a moment because it connects directly to the fifth mistake, the one that decides whether someone like her lives or dies. But first, the fix for mistake number 4. Stop trusting your perception. Trust a number and trust a person. Put a basic thermometer in the room where you spend the most time. They cost a few dollars. When you see that room climbing past the mid-80s and your options for cooling it are limited, that is your signal to act. Get to cooler air, whether that means turning on the AC, going downstairs to the lowest floor of the house, or leaving for somewhere air-conditioned entirely. A few practical moves keep your home from becoming a trap in the first place. Close the blinds and curtains on whatever side of the house faces the sun during the day. You'd be startled by how much solar heat pours through uncovered windows. Heat rises, which means an upstairs bedroom can be 10 degrees hotter than the ground floor on the same afternoon, so on the worst days, sit and sleep in the lowest, coolest room you have. If you have outdoor tasks, errands, or a walk you want to take, do them in the early morning or after the sun drops in the evening. The window from roughly 10 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon is when the sun is at its most punishing. Stay out of it if you can. And set up a check-in system. If you live alone, you identify one person, a neighbor, a family member, a friend from church, and you arrange a daily check-in during any heat wave. A phone call, a knock on the door. It takes 60 seconds, and it is the simplest piece of infrastructure that saves the most lives. And you do the same for someone else. In Chicago, the neighborhoods where people knew their neighbors, where there was social connection, had dramatically lower death rates than the neighborhoods where people were isolated. Half the tragedy in these stories is that someone was in danger for hours and nobody was looking in. Be the person who looks in, and let someone be that person for you. Mistake 5. This is the mistake that determines everything. The line between being uncomfortably hot and being in a life-threatening crisis is drawn in a handful of specific signs, and knowing them is the difference between a frightening afternoon and a funeral. There are 2 stages, and you need to be able to tell them apart. The first is heat exhaustion. Think of this as your body waving a red flag while it can still be pulled back to safety. The signs are heavy sweating, skin that feels cool and clammy to the touch, muscle cramps, a feeling of weakness or dizziness, nausea, a headache, and a pulse that's fast but feels weak and thready. If you recognize this stage, the response is straightforward and it works. Stop all activity immediately. Get to a cool place or at least deep shade. Lie down. Loosen any tight clothing. Sip cool water slowly. Apply cool, wet cloths to the skin, especially the neck, the armpits, and the groin, where major blood vessels run close to the surface and you can cool the blood directly. Give it a little time. Heat exhaustion, when caught here, usually turns around. But if it's missed, if no one recognizes it, or if the person can't get to safety, it can tip over into the second stage. And the second stage is heat stroke, which is a true call 911 right now medical emergency. Heat stroke means the body's cooling system has completely failed. The CDC describes it as a condition where the body's temperature can surge past 106 degrees in as little as 10 to 15 minutes once the breakdown begins. Here are the signs that must trigger immediate action: confusion, disorientation, slurred speech, or a person who is simply not acting like themselves, not making sense, seeming off in a way you can't quite name. Skin that has gone hot and dry to the touch because the sweating has shut down, a pounding rapid pulse, a severe throbbing headache, fainting, or a loss of consciousness. That confusion, the change in mental status, is the single most important warning sign, and it is the one that gets brushed off most often. Families see it and attribute it to tiredness, or to age, or to the person just being a little out of it from the heat. Do not brush it off. Confusion in a heat wave is a 5-alarm fire. At body temperatures above 104 degrees and climbing, organs begin to sustain damage. The brain, the kidneys, the heart, the muscles. Every minute that passes without cooling increases the risk of permanent injury or death. Speed of cooling, not which hospital they reach, is the single factor that most reliably predicts whether someone survives. If you ever see those signs in yourself or in someone else, here is what you do. Call 911 immediately. While you wait, get the person into the coolest environment available. If you can get them into a cool shower or bath, do it. If not, pack ice or cold, wet cloths onto the neck, the armpits, and the groin and keep them there. Cool aggressively. Do not wait for the ambulance to start. Those minutes before emergency services arrive are the minutes that save the brain and save the life. One critical caution, because well-meaning people get this wrong with the best of intentions. If the person is confused, drowsy, or unconscious, do not try to give them water. Do not pour fluid into the mouth of someone whose awareness is impaired. They can choke on it and aspirate it into their lungs, and now you have two emergencies instead of one. Cool them from the outside with cold cloths and ice at the neck, the armpits, and the groin. Let the paramedics handle fluids when they arrive, and this is where Margaret's story turns. That afternoon, Margaret's neighbor Sandra, who lived in the apartment below her, hadn't heard Margaret's footsteps overhead in hours. The building was quiet in the way that worried her. She went upstairs and knocked. No answer. The door was unlocked. She found Margaret in her chair, awake but barely. Margaret's words weren't making sense. She was mumbling, repeating herself, not tracking the conversation. Her skin was hot and dry to the touch. The fan was still blowing warm air across the room. Sandra didn't know a lot about heat illness, but she knew one thing. She knew that a person who can't talk straight in a hot room is not just tired. She called 911. She soaked a towel in cold water and draped it across Margaret's neck and under her arms. She pulled the fan away and grabbed a bag of frozen peas from the freezer, wrapped it in a cloth, and pressed it against Margaret's neck. The paramedics arrived in 9 minutes. They continued cooling her on the ride in. Margaret spent a night in the hospital. Her kidneys were stressed. Her temperature at admission was 104.2. The attending physician told Sandra plainly that without that knock on the door, Margaret would very likely have died in that chair before morning. Margaret runs the air conditioning now without a word about the bill. She keeps a thermometer clipped to her living room bookshelf, and Sandra still checks in every day when the forecast turns ugly. Margaret lived because one person noticed a silence and didn't ignore it. That is the whole reason I made this video. So let me put all 5 together simply, so you can carry them out of here and act on them today. 1. Do not trust a fan alone when temperatures push into the mid-90s and beyond. Above that range, it can actually make things worse. Get into air conditioning for at least a few hours a day, and if you're using a fan, wet your skin first to give it something to actually work with. 2. Know your medications. Diuretics, beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, anticholinergics, and certain antidepressants and allergy pills can all compromise your body's ability to handle heat. Ask your doctor or pharmacist one question before the next hot spell: what should I do differently on extreme days? And never stop or adjust a medication on your own. 3. Stop waiting for thirst to tell you to drink. It is no longer a reliable signal. Drink on a schedule, roughly a glass of water every hour on hot days, and check that your urine stays pale. Match any alcohol or heavy caffeine with an extra glass of water. 4. Stop trusting the feeling that you're fine. Trust a thermometer. When the room you're in climbs past the mid-80s and you can't cool it down, get somewhere that's air-conditioned and set up a daily check-in with someone during a heat wave and be that check-in for someone else. 5. Learn the line between heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Confusion, hot dry skin, a pounding pulse, fainting. If you see those signs, call 911 and start cooling immediately with cold cloths or ice at the neck, armpits, and groin. Minutes decide everything. None of these are complicated. None of them cost much. Every single one is something you can do today before the next dangerous day arrives, and any one of them can be the lever that stands between a normal summer and a tragedy. This summer has already killed people who had no idea they were in danger. In France, in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan. People who were sitting in their own homes, doing what they'd always done, trusting a system inside their body that had quietly changed without telling them. You now know what they didn't. That is not a small thing. If this video helped you, I'll ask one favor that costs nothing. Subscribe so these reach more people. Give it a like so the algorithm puts it in front of someone who needs it. And send it to one person you love who is over 60 or who lives alone or who you know won't ask for help until it's too late. because this is the kind of thing that actually saves a life. Sometimes the thing that saves someone is not a drug or a surgery. It's a piece of information that arrived one day before it was needed. Stay cool this summer. Look in on the people around you, and I'll see you in the next one.